Hello and welcome. It's really good to see you. Tonight I'm going to go into three of my favourite authors, which is going to be really interesting, I hope, for you, but very interesting for me because I've been doing a little bit of research and I've really enjoyed doing that. So we're going to do Rumi, who is obviously the Sufi Persian poet who was around a very long time ago, very ancient. And then we're going to also talk about Katherine May, who's an amazing British author, and also the Irish poet, Hegelian philosopher, author and priest, who is John O'Donoghue. So I'm really looking forward to delving into a bit of that with you guys. So here we go. So we're going to talk about John O'Donoghue first. The book here, which I have, Anam Cara, which was given to me by a lovely friend of mine, Monty, during lockdown, was a fantastic place for me to just get some resolve and delve into and jump into when I needed a bit of support and kindness for myself, really. So I found it really, really beneficial during that time. And after all of the stuff that I've been through, relationships, bereavement, all the stuff, the divorce, everything else, I found that this was a really great refuge. It was something that was almost like a blanket that kind of wrapped me up, and I really, really enjoyed reading it. And I still delve into bits and pieces of it because the thing about the three authors and the three kind of readings that I'm going to do tonight are that they are stuff that you can go back to because they're not just like huge, great big long novels and things. They're not overwhelming. You can jump in and out, dive in and out, get what you need from them, kind of put them in your backpack of them, your emotional backpack, and run off with them and use them as kind of anecdotes to all the stuff that you're going through in your life at that moment. So John O'Donoghue was born in 1956. Sadly, he died in 2008. He was only 52. He was a Celtic. He was born into a sort of Gaelic-speaking family. He was from Ireland. He was a deeply spiritual man and spent a lot of his time philosophizing. He was a kind of Hegelian philosopher, author and poet, but also just came up with the most incredible kind of recipes for life, really. How you can dig deep within yourself and find these places of stillness and calm. And I think the best way to introduce him is really to read something from him. So I'm going to read something from Anam Cara. It's called The Wellspring of Love Within. You can search far and in hungry places for love. It is a consolation to know that there is a wellspring of love within yourself. If you trust that this wellspring is there, you will then be able to invite it to awaken. The following exercise could help develop awareness of this capacity. When you have moments on your own or spaces in your time, just focus on the well at the root of your soul. Imagine that nourishing stream of belonging, ease, peace, and delight. Feel with your visual imagination the refreshing waters of that well gradually flowing up through the arid earth of the neglected side of your heart. It is helpful to imagine this particularly before you sleep. Then during the night you will be in constant flow of enrichment and belonging. You will find that when you awake at dawn, there will be a lovely, quiet happiness in your spirit. One of the most precious things you should always preserve in a friendship and in love is your own difference. It can happen within the circle of love that one person will tend to imitate the other or reimagine himself in the image of the other. While this may indicate a desire for total commitment, it is also destructive and dangerous. There was an old man I knew on an island off the west of Ireland. He had an unusual hobby. He used to collect photographs of newly married couples. He would then get a photograph of that couple some 10 years later. From the 10-year-old photograph, he would begin to demonstrate how one of the couples was beginning to resemble the other. Often in a relationship, there can be a subtle homogenizing force which is destructive. The irony is that it is usually the difference that makes one person attractive to the other. Consequently, this difference needs to be preserved and nurtured. Love is also a force of light and nurture that liberates you to inhabit to the full your own difference. There should be no imitation of each other, no need to be defensive or protective in each other's presence. Love should encourage and free you fully into your full potential. In order to preserve your own difference in love, you need plenty of room for your soul. It is interesting that in Hebrew, one of the original words for salvation is also the word for space. When you're born on a farm, you realise that space is vital, especially when you're sowing something. If you plant two trees side by side, they will smother each other. That which grows needs space. Khalil Gibran says, "But let there be spaces in your togetherness. Let the winds of the heavens dance between you." Space allows your otherness to find its own rhythm and contour. Yeats speaks of a little space for the rose breathed to full. One of the lovely areas of love where space can be rendered beautiful is when two people make love. The one you love is the one to whom you can bring the full array and possibility and delight of your senses in the knowledge that it will be received in welcome and tenderness. Since the body is in the soul, the body is illuminated all around with soul light. It is suffused with a gentle, sacred light. Making love with someone should not be merely physical or mechanical release. It should engage the spiritual depth which awakens when you enter the soul of another person. The soul of a person is most intimate. You meet the person's soul before you meet the body. When you meet soul and body as one, you enter the world of other. If a person could bring a gentle and reverent recognition to the depth and beauty of that encounter, it would extend incredible possibilities of delight and ecstasy within lovemaking. It would free in both people this inner wellspring of deeper love. It would reunite them externally with the third force of light, the ancient circle that actually brings two souls together in the first place. Fascinating little bit of reading there and interesting concept. And it's so true. Khalil Gibran talks about two people being sort of together but separate, so there's space in between. It's that whole thing, isn't it, about the space in between everything being the space where sometimes the most interesting things happen. Like when you plant the two trees, you can't plant them too close together, otherwise one will suffocate the other and take over. There has to be space for each to develop and grow individually and with its own kind of personality and strength and the ability to develop with its own character and in its own ways. And hopefully then, often, like you said, opposites attract. Often those opposites who are attracted will stay attracted to each other because they've had the space to be able to grow together, not intertwined with each other in a way which can suffocate the other. And it means that hopefully as they grow older in their relationship or their marriage or their partnership or whatever it is, they will still be able to see each other. They won't be so close that they can't see, that they're blinded by that. And they will be able to see each other and appreciate each other and be thankful for what they have as individual characters, as individual people. And I think those are really huge, great words of wisdom. I love that. And I love that book. I think it's so interesting and very insightful. It really resonated with me. Okay, so the next person that I want to talk about is Katherine May. Now, Katherine May wrote this book, Wintering, and this was a book that I bought during lockdown. And I mean, lockdown was very difficult for many of us, but I actually, apart from the horror and the horrendous things that were going on with the virus and things, I actually really enjoyed it because it was the time when my divorce came through. I had my own front door key for my first time in my life. I had my children living at home, or two of them were living at home. And I felt like it was a whole new, fresh beginning for me. And I found it really, really liberating. And it gave me space to start doing my book. It gave me time to start just concentrating on the things I really wanted to do and to stop sort of firefighting and dealing with lawyers and dealing with court cases and dealing with all of that rubbish, house sales and all of the stuff that comes with a very, 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 very long and entangled relationship. And I could just focus on the children, on getting them through and on dealing with what I was going to do with my life going forward. So I found it a very, very liberating time. And I bought this book, Wintering, and I hadn't had space in my head to read for a long time. So I would sit, I had a chaise longue in my kitchen, just an old thing I'd had since the 80s, loads of cushions on it, blanket dog, all of that stuff, and sort of kind of like snuggled up on there and used to read this book. And I just used to dip in and out of it at lunchtime or when I'd finished whatever it was I was doing during the day. And I found it gave me incredible comfort. So I'm going to read a little bit about it. But Katherine May, to tell you a little bit about her, she's in Whitstable actually. She lives in Whitstable, which is in Kent on the coast. It's lovely. It's very famous for its oysters. I've been there a few times. I really like it. And she has written lots of other books as well. She was kind of a late. She came to the discovery that she was that she had a neurodiverse kind of diagnosis later on in her life, as when she was an adult. I think her previous book was about that. But this is Wintering: The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times. And I'm going to read this to you because I think it's just really brilliant. So this is kind of towards the beginning of the book. Winter had begun. Right, this is where we start. There are gaps in the mesh of the everyday world, and sometimes they open up and you fall through them somewhere else. Somewhere else runs at a different pace to here and now, where everyone else carries on. Somewhere else is where ghosts live. Concealed from view and only glimpsed by people in the real world, somewhere else exists at a delay, so that you can't quite keep pace. Perhaps I was already teetering on the brink of somewhere else, anyway. But now I fell through, as simply and discreetly as dust sifting between the floorboards. I was surprised to find that I felt at home there. Winter had begun. Everybody winters at one time or another. Some winter over and over again. Wintering is a season in the cold. It is a fallow period in life when you're cut off from the world, feeling rejected, sidelined, blocked from progress, or cast into the role of an outsider. Perhaps it results from an illness, perhaps from a life event such as a bereavement or the birth of a child. Perhaps it comes from a humiliation or failure. Perhaps you're in a period of transition and have temporarily fallen between two worlds. So winterings creep upon us more slowly, accompanying the protracted death of a relationship, the gradual ratcheting up of caring responsibilities as your parents age, the drip, drip, drip of lost confidence. Some are appallingly sudden, like discovering one day that your skills are considered obsolete. The company you worked for has gone bankrupt, or your partner is in love with someone new. However it arrives, wintering is usually involuntary, lonely, and deeply painful. Yet it's inevitable. We like to imagine that it's possible for life to be one eternal summer, and that we have uniquely failed to achieve that for ourselves. We dream of an equatorial habitat, forever close to the sun, an endless, unvarying high season, but life's not like that. Emotionally, we're prone to stifling summers of low, dark winters, to sudden drops in temperature, to light and shade. Even if, by some extraordinary stroke of self-control and good luck, we're able to keep control of our own health and happiness for an entire lifetime, we still couldn't avoid the winter. Our parents would age and die. Our friends would undertake minor acts of betrayal. The machinations of the world would eventually wait against us. Everywhere along the line we would screw up, or winter would quietly roll in. And I think that's so true. So I'm also going to read something from Katherine May, which is to do with later on in the year, because she goes through the whole year in this book, and it's going to September. So back in September, I went for a walk behind the studio where I go to write. I have what's essentially a cupboard in an old farm building that's otherwise populated with visual artists. I can't really justify any more space. A cupboard is all I need, and a narrow shelf on which to perch my laptop. In any case, I tend to spend more time walking than actually writing, striking off through the farm and into the field beyond, where I can join onto the North Downs Way and walk to Canterbury in an hour if I want to, heading in the opposite direction of a string of little country pubs where I can sit for a while and pretend I'm gathering my wits about me. But mostly I tend to catch the air for a few moments before I return on to my screen again. In one direction there is a walnut orchard. In another, a field of blackcurrant bushes. But mostly there are rows and rows of apple trees. And that is where I went on this day, past the stacked wooden crates that looked ready to take the fruit to market, and through a patch of long grass, already dotted with the skeletons of various umbiphilias, now wasted into fragile starbursts. The sun doesn't reach this spot until the afternoon, and there was a heavy dew still in place, lighting up the spider webs and glossing the apples. I was heading for a row of beehives, so often the object of my walk. All summer I enjoyed listening to their hum and watching the industrious commotion around them. But today I noticed something slightly different. Bisecting the hive was a sheet of newspaper, dividing the top half from the bottom. The bees were floating around it as if on invisible wires, pinging in the stiff lines of their flight. Others clustered on the surface, crawling over the surface of the paper, exploring the seam it made with their hive. They were clearly curious, and I was curious too. What could a sheet of newspaper do for a colony of bees? Well, she carries on to talk about Twitter and how everybody on Twitter seemed to know what a sheet of newspaper does for a colony of bees. But it reminded me, actually, reading that of when I first came to England. I talked about it last week, of how everything smelt of frozen apples. There's something about apples. There's something about that season. When I used to go back to school in September, when I went to school in Bramley, and there are Bramley apples, and we had an orchard of apple trees, and it was always colder then, and the spider webs and the dew on the grass and the frost sometimes, and some of the apples on the ground being eaten by bugs and things, and some of them still hanging on a tree just waiting to be picked, and they were absolutely delicious. So I really can resonate with that, and I think the way she writes is really beautiful. So I would very, very strongly recommend reading her book, Wintering. I haven't read any of her other books. She has written How We Live Now and Electricity of Everything. And yeah, I think they're probably well worth getting to read. I think I might do that for the summer and get myself a sunbed or something and stick it in the shade, and some nice comfy pillows and cushions and a mattress thing to put on, and just read in the shade and see what I can come up with. So the final person that I'm going to talk about tonight is Rumi. And I'm going to have a sip of my pomegranate cordial. Now, Rumi is a Sufi poet, Persian Sufi poet that was born in Afghanistan. And the reason that Rumi is close to my heart is because my children are half Persian, and the culture there is incredibly rich. And sadly, what's happening in Iran at the moment, and all the politics and the history from the last, 50 or so years or longer, since whenever, decades, has been ruined, really. The ancient culture there is just spectacular and so rich, and the civilization there was absolutely amazing, and the history. So Rumi is a poet that I wanted to talk about today. And I've got some notes here. So he was born in 1207, so he's really ancient. He was born in Afghanistan and he died in 1273. His father was a Sufi poet and scholar, and Rumi kind of took after him, really. He was incredibly bright, intelligent, and inquisitive. His family were forced to leave Afghanistan because there were all sorts of forces coming through that area of the country, and they went and settled in Turkey. He was known as a Sufi scholar, so he had these amazing ideas and philosophies. And he wrote in a beautiful sort of poetic way, very much in the tradition of that particular time. He spent a lot of his time learning Arabic, which is what people did in that period. And he also gave lectures to the public, and he did that until he was about 35. He lived a fairly kind of nondescript life, I suppose, at that time. But then he met this travelling Sufi, this other kind of luminary character called Shams, or Shamsi Tabrizi. And they soon became firm friends, which his family didn't like, because he spent all his time with this particular chap they didn't really know much about him. He travelled, he was nomadic, and he turned up, and Rumi was kind of very taken by him and his ideas. Then they did a lot of work together and came up with lots of ideas together and did a lot of writing together. And then one day, they were kind of recognised as kindred spirits, really. But then one day, he suddenly disappeared, and nobody knew where this Shamsi guy had disappeared to, which is all very strange. And because the relationship that Rumi and Shamsi had caused a lot of jealousy within the family, and they didn't like the fact that he was neglecting giving his talks and everything. So Rumi carried on writing. He carried on writing his religious poetry. Some say that it was religious, some say that he wrote it for Shamsi, and often he signed his poetry Shamsi rather than his own name. So, or Shams rather. So it's quite interesting that that's what he did. Anyway, I'm going to read. I have a couple of books. I have this book which I've had for years and years, like probably about 20 years, which I always used to dip into as well, which was given to me by a friend, which I really like. And also another book which is kind of more about his kind of Rumi's little book of life, which is just quotes and things like that. But I wanted to read something else. I'm going to read you this, which I think is really interesting. So it's something that Rumi wrote. A moment of happiness, you and I sitting on the veranda, apparently two, but one in soul, you and I. We feel the flowing water of life here, you and I, with the garden's beauty and the birds singing. The stars will be watching us, and we will show them what it is to be a thin crescent moon. You and I, unselfed, will be together, indifferent to idle speculation, you and I. The parrots of heaven will be cracking sugar as we laugh together, you and I, in one form upon this earth and in another form in a timeless, sweet land. I think that's really beautiful. I'm going to read it again. A moment of happiness, you and I sitting on the veranda, apparently two, but one in soul, you and I. We feel the flowing water of life here, you and I, with the garden's beauty and the birds singing. The stars will be watching us, and we will show them what it is to be a thin crescent moon. You and I, unselfed, will be together, indifferent to idle speculation, you and I. The parrots of heaven will be cracking sugar as we laugh together, you and I. In one form upon this earth, and in another form in a timeless, sweet land. Isn't that beautiful? I think that the translations of Rumi really, it kind of depends who you have as a translator, because his work is obviously open to interpretation, and the way that history and different scholars and poets have translated his work. I think it's really interesting that if you look at different people, they would translate it in a very different way. And one of the best translations that I think is the most accessible today is by Coleman Barks, and he's American. And if you ever get a chance to listen to his readings of Rumi, he's got the most incredible voice. It's like somebody who has a liquid velvet voice that smoked a lot of cigars. But I don't know if he smokes cigars, but anyway, sorry Coleman Barks if you're listening. But yeah, no, he's got the most incredible voice. It's very, very rich. It's very, very, very rich. It works really well with this work, and he's done some gorgeous translations of Rumi's work. So I'm going to read this. It's from The Soul of Rumi, a new collection of ecstatic poems by Rumi, which has been translated by Coleman Barks. The great human questions arose. What is the purpose of desire? What is a dream? A song? How do we know the depth of silence in another human being? What is the heart? What is it to be a true human being? What is the source of the universe, and how do these individual awarenesses connect to that? They ask the Faustian question in many guises. What is it at bottom that holds the world together? How do we balance surrender and discipline? This high level of continuous question and answer permeated the poetry and music, the movement and each activity of the community. They knew that answers might not come in discursive form, but rather in music, in image, in dream, and in the events of life as they occur. So I'm going to finish from the Roman Coleman Barks poetry translations, and I'm just going to read this short one, and then I'm going to just dive into one of my books. I offer no proof other than my whole life and your whole life as they dissolve in each other, as we read or speak, as we watch or dance, as we play or sing, as we walk from being indoors to being out. I offer no proof other than my whole life and your whole life as they dissolve in each other, as we read or speak, as we watch or dance, as we play or sing, as we walk from being indoors to being out. I think that Rumi was writing love poems to Shams, whether it was a holy love, whether it was a crush, whatever it was. I think that a lot of the poems that he's written that were written for God or for a holy person are actually probably for him. So I'm going to read one last poem, which is also about love, by Rumi, which is from my book, and it's beautiful. Love is longing and longing, the pain of being parted. No illness is rich enough for the distress of the heart. A lover's lament surpasses all other cries of pain. Love is the royal threshold of God's mystery, the carnival of small affections and polite attachments, which litter and consume our passing time, is no match to love which pulses behind this play. It's easy to talk endlessly about love. To live love is to be seized by joy and bewilderment. Love is not clear-minded, busy with images and argument. Language is too precious, too impudent, too sane to stop the molten lava of love which churns the blood. The practicing energy burns the tongue to silence. The knowing pen is disabled. Servile paper shrivels in the fire of love. Bald reason too is an us complaining love, deceived by spoilt lucidity. Love is dangerous, offering no consolation. Only those who are ravaged by love know love. The sun alone unveils the sun to those who have the sense to receive the senseless and not turn away. Cavernous shadows need the light to play, but light and light alone can lead you to the light alone. Material shadows weigh down your vision with dross, but the rising sun splits the ashen moon in empty half. The outer sun is our daily miracle in timely birth and death. The inner sun dazzles the inner eye in timeless space. Our daily sun is but a working star in a galaxy of stars. Our inner sun is one, the dancing nuance of eternal light. You must be set alight by the inner sun. You have to live your love, or else you'll only end in words. Dazzles the inner eye in a timeless space. Our daily sun is but a working star in a galaxy of stars. Our inner sun is one, the dancing nuance of eternal light. You must be set alight by the inner sun. You have to live your love, or else you'll only end in words. There we go. So, as we finish, I think you have to live your love, otherwise you'll only end in words. If you don't live your love, how do you live your life fully and completely? And as John O'Donoghue says, live your life with your love, but live your love with space in between your togetherness, so that you have space to flourish and space to grow. And in wintering, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. You don't have to be running around at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You can just relax, put your feet up, read a book. It's all about self-love, isn't it? It's all about a measured self-love, which enables you to really fulfill and express yourself in a way which gives you the ability to grow and feed and nurture yourself. If you don't do that, you can't love others. You can't love your partner fully, or even go out there and think or consider about having a partner or a relationship with anybody. It's all about looking after you and then giving space for that relationship to grow. And when it comes to your children, it's exactly the same. You know, if I consider my children as, you know, being incubated in little kind of nursery of plants, a little beautiful nursery of plants, you have to nurture them and water them and feed them and transplant them and make sure that they've got space to flourish and grow in between each other. So it's very true. All of the passages that I've read by three completely different authors. One young woman who's still alive and flourishing and living her own full life with her dogs and cats and kids on the coast in Kent in England. One sadly, unfortunately not alive Irishman who was a priest and a philosopher and lived a Celtic gorgeous life in Ireland in County Clare. And one ancient poet from Persia, well, from Afghanistan, a Sufi poet who lived, you know, over 1,000 years ago. I mean, it's incredible that after all of that time, over all of those centuries, there's really one thing that binds all of those people together. It's love, it's self-love, and it's love for others. And I think it's really, really important that we hold on to that. As everything in the world is happening at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and we are subjected to all of the horror that's happening in the world. You know, light your candle. Well, I'm going that way, but I'm going backwards. But there we go. I can't even do it. There we go. That candle there. My lovely white company candle that smells of pomegranates. I thought, I'm going to light my candle tonight. I'm going to have my little sort of shrine of books. And I just wanted you to be part of that. And to bring you into really my space and my world and the way that I think. And I hope it's brought you some solace and some comfort and some inspiration. They're very good books. I have to say, I do recommend them fully, because the really nice thing about those books is you don't have to read the whole thing. They're not 500 pages. You can just dip in and out of each chapter or each verse, each reading, each little section. It's just fantastic. So really good to have by the side of the bed or wherever you are in the daytime, where you can just, you know, stick one in your handbag or in your backpack when you're traveling or something. Fantastic source of inspiration. Right, let's have a look and see what people are saying in the chat here. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask me about anything in particular? Because I'm really happy to answer. We're running slightly over, but I really don't mind, because I found it very interesting and I do love reading aloud. So please do ask me if there's anything that you'd like to know, or if there's any more questions you'd like me to answer before I go. I'll give you another few minutes. I'm going to try and do these reading live events sort of once a week. So I've done 3 classics here, I think, of the sort of spirituality field. So if you want to come back with some other ideas for me, that would be great. Lisa Tresco Anderson has asked me what book she's just topped in. So Lisa, we've got some Rumi, so really well worth listening to some of that stuff. We've got Anam Cara, which is I don't know if you can see that because the light's not great. John O'Donoghue, which is fantastic as well. I don't know if you've read that. Amazing. And then Katherine May's Wintering, which is a lot more contemporary, but again, a really lovely book, really inspirational and very heartwarming. So yeah, we had those 3 books, so very well worth listening to again if you want to. And again, as I said, if there's anything else you'd like me to read, I'm more than happy to jump in and do that next time. I'm really pleased, do open my eyes to stuff, because I've got all my books behind me, but I'm very happy to go to the bookshop and order some more or go and buy some more if you've got some really good ideas there. So great. Lucy's saying she's just found This Is Live, so she'll look at it, look at the books. I think they're really amazing books, and I think that at the moment when life is the way it is, they will offer comfort for sure, and also great to give as gifts, because, or read to your family or your friends or your children, or if you have a sick relative or something. They're hugely comforting and really, really, really enjoyable as well. So I hope that you do get a chance to get around to looking at them. I can't recommend them enough. And yeah, so I am going to go now, unless there's any other questions from anybody. I'm very happy to answer. But I will go now because it's getting late here. It's still very light outside. I'm going to turn my computer around so that you can see. I hope you can see, because it's at this time of year. I'm just sort of moving all my gubbins. At this time of year, everything in this country stays light for absolutely ages. And it's like 25 to 9 in the evening, and it's been this kind of light all day because it's been really, really grey today. So it's still super light outside, so it's lovely. And hopefully it will be like this for at least another hour, and as we get to the longest day. So yeah. Okie dokie, guys, I'm going to love you and leave you, and I'm just going to say a huge thank you for joining me, and it means a great deal. And as long as you support me in these things, I will carry on doing them. So keep the comments coming. As I said, just let me know if there's something that you'd like me to read next week, and I will definitely look into doing that for you. So I am now going to say goodnight. I'm going to blow my candle out, and I'm going to shut my shutters, and I'm going to go and put my feet up and relax. And I hope you guys do the same. And I'm going to switch off from the laptop, and I'm going to switch off from reading, and I'm going to watch something interesting on television, maybe a nature program or a cooking program or something exciting, or gardening. Chelsea's on at the moment, Chelsea Flower Show. So there's a lot going on with gardening here in London at the moment, and I do love watching the Chelsea Flower Show because they give us a really fantastic insight into who all the interesting growers are and what they're doing. So I will go now and go and put my feet up and watch a bit of the Chelsea Flower Show, and I hope that you guys have a fun time this evening, whatever you're doing, wherever you are in the world, or this morning, wherever you are in the world. If you're in New York or Australia or Timbuktu or Norway or wherever you are, Canada, South Africa, Egypt. Anyway, lots and lots of love, and take care, and good night. Bye bye. See you soon. Lovely to see you. Keep smiling.